Hi, Ameen.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. It's afternoon where I'm at. So,
Uh, cool. It's 11 a.m. here. I just woke up like
y-
10 minutes ago.
you're in San Francisco?
No, I'm in DC. I'm visiting parents and stuff.
All right. Can you hear me well? Is everything all right on your side?
Um, yeah, I can hear you okay.
Okay. One more question. There were quite a few questions submitted. How much time do you have, more or less?
I looked at them. I'd say we could probably get through most of it in about an hour or something.
Okay, great. I just I just went through the questions and I decided to group them in order to avoid too many duplicate questions. So I have, for people listening to this, I'm recording already, just so you know. So for people listening to this and who submitted questions, I made about 4 categories. First, we'll do some general questions, then some Spankchain related questions, then some Ethereum and governance related questions, the Moloch DAO, and then we'll just wrap up. All right. So, well, first and foremost, thank you for doing this. There were
Mm.
many questions submitted, so I look forward to hearing how it goes. Can you share a little bit about? Well, we actually covered it already, but can you share a little bit about the place where you are right now?
I'm in like my childhood room. Uh, is that what you mean?
Mostly, it's nice for in this distributed world to get a sense of where the people are are at.
It's like my Spock and Matrix and Ender's Game posters. It's like my fraternity paddle. This is like my Camus quote. uh, Yeah, I'm just like at home with my books and my mom. Today's Persian New Year's, so we're gonna like have see our friends and go to dinner and stuff. I'll be here for like a week, and then I'm gonna go to Toronto. Yep.
All right. Can
This
you?
is this is in the suburbs of DC. It's like Maryland. So
Where are you based though? Is it San Francisco?
no, I live in Venice Beach,
All right. All right.
Los Angeles.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are, what your interests are, and share a little bit about your background?
Hmm. Sure. Um, I'm like a programmer, video gamer. Uh, I um, I grew up in DC. Uh, I had a fairly uninteresting childhood, I guess. Did some martial arts, played soccer, learned a bunch of stuff in school. Got a degree in chemical engineering. Uh, I left that after graduating to start learning about like programming and software engineering, and then worked on startups, did some freelance web development, and then eventually discovered Ethereum. Worked at ConsenSys, did stuff on state channels and the energy like markets, and helped launch AdChain, which was the first TCR, and then left ConsenSys to started Spankchain, and then that was like a year and a half ago, and just recently launched the Moloch DAO.
Who do you look up to, and if it's nobody in particular, where do you go for advice?
I look up to Vitalik. uh, I look up to like the engineers and the builders of the world. Um, I look up to the people who can inspire. I look up to people who uh, you know genuinely want to make things better in like a sustainable way, which it seems like uh, technology is really the only way to do. It's like even if you make a social change, it's like not sticky forever. But if you like progress technology, there's no like going backwards. It's a lot harder to go backwards. So
All right. So we'll start with the questions that were submitted by members. I will, because I grouped them together, I will not name people's. I will not mention the usernames, but in the thread where I post this video and audio, I will link to them so people can actually see who asked the question. You just mentioned consensus, and there were a few questions about that. As a former Mesh member, what's your take on the work of consensus, and if you're familiar enough with the changes that have occurred since you left?
yeah, so ConsenSys is a really interesting company because it's not really a company. it's like a venture production studio, which means that, and it has like 3 different categories. It has its like enterprise work, it has its like open source, and then it has like the startups that it tries to spin up. So like ConsenSys incubates Infura and MetaMask and subsidizes them heavily because they're powerful components of the Ethereum ecosystem. Things like Truffle, they're all part of ConsenSys. And then it also has, incubated like Gnosis, which spun out, launched a token, and now ConsenSys holds, some of their equity and tokens and so forth. And then on the other side, it does the consulting, building enterprise solutions and proof of concepts, and having partnerships with big, Fortune 500 firms. I left ConsenSys the summer of 2017 in May, so almost 2 years. I was employee 100. I left at about 250. I think what they do is super important. I think Joe tries to run the company like he initially wanted it to be more of like a flat structure and more of a duocracy, and had some ideas around that, which resulted in a high degree of chaos because things were not obvious. Like, you didn't necessarily know what to do. Like, when I got there, he's like, "Great, welcome, pick a project." And I'm like, "Wait, what do you mean?" He's like, yeah, like, "You're hired." I'm like, "Okay." And he's like, "Figure out what to do." And so, like, I thrive in chaos. I don't know if everybody has that, leaning. But for me, it was exciting to be able to like go figure out what to do and like talk to all the people and figure out what was going on. But some people like want to be told, they want to be like, have a structured path where they know that they're doing well. So I think that they're going to be much stronger after they spin out a lot of the companies and layoffs and stuff, because I'm pretty sure everybody who's still there is like, "Oh, thank God." It's like what they're thinking.
What are your thoughts on the amount of people they let go? Because the previous talk, or the first one with Jeremiah, he mentioned that for after the whole decline, it was actually surprising that they only let go about 10 or 15% or however much it was. Is that what you think as well?
Yeah. I think that he's also spinning out a bunch of spokes, or like forcing their hands to spin out, and that's like a higher number. So I think in cumulative it's like 40% or something. But it might even have benefited from more. But maybe like, once this round is over and like things clear up, and then you see who's gained some additional motivation and who still hasn't, you can readdress the situation later. But I think that they'll be fine as a company. I expect them to focus a lot more on revenue and sustainability, and not just growing the number of people, but growing the output. And so I think that they'll make the right calls in the future. Joe's a pretty smart guy.
What do you think about ConsenSys work which benefits oil and gas giants? I couldn't verify if there's anything to this, but
they do work with oil and gas giants, and it's like, it's one of those things where you're like, "Oh, but they do this," like, shouldn't, like, aren't they supposed to be good actors in the space, and yet they're working with those guys? And it's like, yeah, and like, I drive a car, right? So like, I'm complicit. Or like, I take an Uber around, and like, I don't want my prices to be high. So like, it's sort of nonsense in some to some degree, and like, and even if it wasn't, like, the people that they're working with within the oil and gas giants tend to be those like more focused on renewable energy, and like, building better market systems and like tracking things better. So it's like, most of the things that blockchain can be used for, like, are generally helpful, even if like if applied to an oil and gas giant, it'll make them you know, better able to like track the oil to maybe like if there's a spill or something, like they'll be able to find the source better, stuff like that. Now it's like also kind of weird if you like one of something that came up in a team meeting once was really funny, and somebody was like, so are we building like Uport for slaves? I think they were talking about like Saudi Arabia. So it's like you can track all your slaves, and it's like, you know, it hits hard because like that might be what it's used for. And then it's sort of this like question of like, well, we didn't create the world in which the government, you know, is able to do that, or like is, you know, motivated to do that. Like, is it our responsibility? Like, are we complicit? Like, for every single, you know, government that might, and it's like, what if, you know, you take their money and then you're able to grow it and then like give many people self-sovereignty elsewhere, right? Like these things tend to be a lot more nuanced than you know, first glance. So like, I think a lot of people focus on the you know, shock value appearance of something or like some association that they don't like. But if they were in charge, the company would die immediately because they don't know how to make any hard decisions, like do anything that is unpopular, that makes people upset, right?
There was a recent article where Gavin Wood was quoted as calling Joe Lubin the Darth Vader of Ethereum. Do you have any comment about that remark?
I think it's hilarious. I love the whole like Gavin, you know, making Joe out to be a Darth Vader. He's like, he's not very Vader-esque, right? Like he's pretty soft-spoken guy. I don't think I've really ever seen him angry. He's shrewd. He's like good at money, right? He like used to be a vice president of technology at Goldman. And there's the quote, like, you can take the man out of Goldman, but you can't take Goldman out of the man. He's like very good at playing zero-sum games. So like, you know, if you were expecting differently, then it might surprise you, like years of hustling people in poker and whatnot. But like, I don't see him as like a Vader-like figure. I think that he has genuinely, you know, he's an old guy. Like, he could be doing anything, right? And instead he works like probably you know, top 1 percentile of like ConsenSys people, like how hard they work. Like he's always there. He's working till like 8 or 9 every night. Always taking meetings. At least when I was there, I don't know if he slowed down or anything. Works harder than I do, that's for sure. So like, I don't think he's like malicious, right? He's not like going around murking Jedi and like trying to take over the galaxy. He's like trying to build Ethereum to like replace financial system, because like when he was at Goldman, like that was probably his job. His job is to like bet on you know, technological infrastructure for financial systems, and so he sees Ethereum as like the next logical progression, and he's betting everything on it personally. And so he's doing whatever he can to make that happen. And like sometimes, you know, in business, if there's like a deal to be made, you know, he'll push hard and maybe he'll get a better deal, and it might be seen as like exploitative or you know, predatory or something. But it's like a lot of the people who do end up working for him do it because like it's really fun, and often he does give you the best option, or like you were impatient and he had time on his side because his negotiating position was going to like get better over time faster than yours would. So you know, end up making a deal and maybe you regret it later or something. But like, I don't know. I don't see him as like evil. I think he's just like smart and wants to see Ethereum grow.
Switching gears a little bit, crypto. So this is a question submitted. crypto has already attracted much economic interest. What can we do to spark more interest in the potential social and political benefits of blockchain technology?
Social and political benefits. So like, what?
I,
Yes, we don't.
I guess the person who submitted the question looks at the economic interest. The questions were submitted on ETHRader after all, and is wondering how can we show the world or show whoever it is about the social and political benefits of blockchain technology. I, I don't know anything. I don't know the context of the question. We can skip it if it's hard without context.
I'll talk about it for a little bit. So it's like social, political, like the way capitalism works. Typically, like rich people get the cool stuff first, and then they make the means of production cheaper, and then everybody else gets it. So like we shouldn't be surprised if that's how this is playing out. And like the first people who play with like fancy blockchain toys are like the people who are the most economically incentivized to do so. So like just by having economic interest, it makes the social and political use case more likely to happen sooner. And like the types of stuff that interested there is like low cost of remittance for doing like international donations. And we've started to see that. There's some like, UN, UNICEF. I think like Web3 Foundation was doing some stuff with them, helping them not only do donations but also like track the people who receive them. I think voting is probably one of the areas that'll be most helpful, because we've had we have paper ballots. It's a disgrace. Like we should feel ashamed of ourselves. Fucking year is it? And like that would be really nice. And also like basically every opportunity to like solve government corruption, because there's all these like sci-fi movies, right, where there's a guy or maybe girl, and then like they go into the computer system after dark and they like change a number, and then like something happens, they get away with it, right? And it's like so dumb because blockchain just eliminates that as like a narrative tool in every sci-fi movie, because anytime you'd tamper with any database, like somebody would know, right? That Merkle tree is gonna get appended to, and you're not gonna be able to get away with it. So like as a tool for preventing corruption, it's like seeing more adoption in like I think developing countries or smaller countries that have an easier time experimenting. But yeah, it's a long road to get there. I think that the economic interest will drive it there.
Mm-hmm. We will touch on the economic interest a little bit further down the line. Switching over to Spankchain, what's your elevator pitch for Spankchain when asked what you do for a living?
I'm putting porn on the blockchain. Actually, first I'm like, take one guess. What do you think this is? And they're like, something about porn and crypto. I'm like, you got it. Good job. And so, I start out with, I was like, we built, micropayments infrastructure on Ethereum, and like we built a campsite, and so you can get paid in crypto and earn crypto, and then like, this is important for the adult industry, not only because that's where all the technology gets adopted first, but more importantly because like they have their bank accounts shut down and their PayPal accounts frozen and stuff like that, and so like it actually matters to the adult industry because they are discriminated against by banks, and the people who are the most likely to move over to a new financial system are like the people who are the most ostracized by the existing one. And then people are like, okay, I get it. I get like the why, and the why is really important. So like if I still have time in the elevator, then I'll talk about various products and like Spank Bank. It's you stake your Spank in Mint's booty. And they're like, wait, what? By that time, they're usually laughing.
Yeah, it's a funny topic when you mention like porn and the blockchain, but the problems you're solving aren't just. I mean, they're real life problems, real world problems. It's not just, oh, we're starting a porn website. It's like, no. It's something completely different. Because the follow up question would be like, who is actually your customer? And that's probably, or who are you building it for? And that's probably the adult performers, right? Who have all kinds of problems getting bank accounts or being shut down or shut out of bank accounts and those kind of things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have to like build something useful in order to like get to that point, right?
Yeah. Growing Spankchain has been a wild ride, I'm sure, and the company is still young. What's one thing you wish you would have done differently in terms of running a company in the bleeding edge of space that is crypto? Are there unique challenges that you can share?
I wish I had, like everyone else in ETH Trader, sold way more of my ETH at the top. But aside from that, probably invested more heavily in mentors earlier on.
For you personally or the company?
For me personally, just so I could like, I've learned basically everything the hard way. So it would have been nice to be like, hey, what do I do? And you know, I still can find more mentors and stuff. I, you know, like Spankchain this past year focused a lot on like the bleeding edge of technology and like the state channel stuff, and you know, launched our micropayment system with Connext, and now they're bringing it to market for the rest of the ecosystem. It like was a good strategy to market for the like crypto community, and then try and use the like newly wealthy, you know, ETH is at $1,000 community to like spur the like initial growth of Spankchain's user base. But like as crypto crashed, like that became less and less viable. So I wish I'd been more aware of that, maybe pivoted earlier. Like right now we're, you know, catering a lot to like Web2 users, like adding fiat options and like abstracting over, you know, like whether you bought in with fiat or bought in with crypto, and make it look like the same experience. So that probably would have been wiser to do earlier. Yeah. I think that's about it. I don't know.
Right. When it comes to introducing the crypto model to empower people in the adult industry, how has the general reception behind the scenes been? The adult industry is always referenced as being one of the first applications for new technology. It would be interesting to know if the cliche still has merit.
Yeah, for sure. The adult industry is cool because like, you know, the day I'm waiting for is like the day that, you know, all the performers start putting like, you know, ENS names in their profiles, so that they can like start getting tips directly. And so at Vegas last year, we at AVN, which is like the Oscars of porn, we like, you know, our first real foray into the adult industry was we launched this like website called cryptotitties.com, which is a leaderboard for ranking boobs based on how many tips they'd received. And so it was really cool to be able to, you know, get performers to come to our booth and then be like, hey, look, like we're going to give you $100 cash to take a picture of your tits. And they were like, okay, deal. And then I was like, and we'll give you another, you know, $100 in Ether if you stick around and download like Cypher Browser, which was one of the best Ethereum wallets of the day. And so they did, and then we'd send them the Ether, and, you know, some of them would have to figure it out. But I think that my favorite part of that was like the sovereignty. Like they'd never had digital sovereign money before that like lived on their phone that they controlled. Right? It's always like through some service. You're depending on some third party that you have to trust, and third party doesn't like you, right? And so that was really cool. And over the last year, even though crypto has crashed, we've gained a little bit more recognition. People have had the, you know, opportunity to let it sink in, like what's going on, who are we, and so the reception has been really good. It's gotten really hard to talk about crypto in adult without talking about Spankchain, which is a goal of ours. And I think this year is going to be a lot more business focused, a lot more emphasis on partnerships for our payment processor, crypto payment processor product, SpankPay, to integrate to allow them to easily accept crypto. And then, like expanding the services and like growing internationally, accepting other forms of currency will mean that, you know, we have some users come in that are more noobs and like they don't get it, but like for the performers, they can still cash out in crypto and stuff. So like they've gotten used to it. One of my favorite things is seeing the community engage on Discord. So we have a Discord, several thousand people there, fairly active, and there's like performers teaching other performers like how to use, you know, like decentralized exchanges like Radar Relay and like trading and stuff, and a bunch of crypto enthusiasts that are like helping them along. So the reception's been good. It's like you want to sort of curate like a small curious group that makes it all the way over, you know, because crypto has a super steep learning curve. It's like technology development's pointless if you know nobody knows how to use it. So having that like core community of people who've made it all the way, that everyone else can look at and be like, oh well, if they can do it, we can do it, is I think a powerful motivator for getting the rest of people engaged.
Yeah, it reminds me of the talk you gave at DEF CON 4, which is where I first saw you. You had a colleague of yours or an ex-adult worker, a girl, I can't remember her name, but she was actually explaining the benefits for her. And that it makes sense. Like if you listen to a story of somebody who's actually inside, and I guess for other adult workers, it's kind of, yeah, this all makes sense. And these are real world problems we're solving. So when she was there explaining the Spankchain business model and how it works, it actually made a lot of sense.
Yeah, for sex workers, like especially like everybody who does sex work like has a fake identity. Like they would put crypto Twitter trolls to shame. They have like fake identities, maybe several, you know, Proton Mail accounts. Take their security very seriously, and like if they're, you know, maybe crypto in adult has like in escorting has like a, I don't know, 1 or 2 or 3% penetration right now, but like for what they do, it's like pretty helpful because, you know, if you need to place a deposit or something in advance, or if you want to pay, like there's no chargebacks. You can't like, you know, somehow get PayPal or Square Cash or something to like send you the money back. Say, oh, it was invalid. Oh, I messed up or whatever. Right. And I think as like privacy tools come online, they'll be like, it'll be the best use case.
How do the quote-unquote blockchain space peers react to Spankchain? I see Vitalik frequently mentioning Spankchain as one of the projects with scaling solutions, but are all blockchain peers so open-minded about the project?
No, but we bet that most of them would be, and so far we've been right. So like, it started out as a joke, and we sort of embraced it. You know, we called it Spankchain, right? Like, we have Booty and Spank and the Spank Bank and Crypto. Like we're having fun, right? We're not hiding what we're doing in order to appease anybody's sensibilities. We're owning the fact that this is an adult, and that's fine. And the first response that everybody has when you take a position that extreme, or what seems to be that extreme, is shock and you know, oh, this is strange, this is weird. Like I don't know, like. Am I going to hurt my reputation if I endorse this or associate with this? And Vitalik and Joe Lubin were actually the first people in the space to like mention us publicly. Like Joe mentioned us on stage at Ethereum, which meant a lot to, you know, me and my team and also the community. But I knew that like the ideological Spankchain flippening in terms of like how everybody perceived us was coming. Because I knew there would be a moment in time that like people would realize that not associating with us because of the stigma was more taboo than like associating with us. And like you can point like this wasn't always true, right? Like if crypto is the same as it is, but all the people, we transported time travel back 10 years or something, it's less likely that we would have been embraced as readily, because the demographic changes that are happening right now are one of the main reasons this is happening. So it's like 70% of adults watch porn. Um, that number has grown, and like the number of people who like the people who like grew up reading a Playboy magazine and like tits on a piece of paper was like the most graphic visual stimulus they experienced. They're like very old now, and they think everybody else is insane because we're watching this like hardcore whatever, and for us that's normal, right? For us it's just like what we do on a random day. It's like spin it up and um, and they still make the rules and they still set the like cultural norms or whatever, and they're all gonna die. No offense to any of them, but they're all gonna die. And so like in the next 5 or 10 years, like you're going to see the taboo, the stigma against sex in general, and sex work as a sort of separate category like erode. This is going to happen. Like the biggest detractors or like antagonists to this happening are like the evangelical Christians and the super religious, right? It's like the Muslims who run Iran and like the the Christian freaks here, that are the biggest, the most opposed, and like atheism also is growing, and with the internet, it's like really hard to you know forcibly curate people's information intake, and so they get exposed to all the ideas, and they're like, wait a second, none of this makes any sense. Like this whole God thing, like I don't know, man. And so when you combine that, you get this like this tipping point that's about to happen, that I can see pretty clearly, and like that's what I'm betting on. And like I think Ethereum to me and like crypto, the wider crypto community, is sort of the next like tier of acceptance. But like the way that we've progressed within the community is indicative to me that this is actually the case, that this is possible. Because if you take a demographically and slightly younger and slightly more rebellious, then like you start there. Like if we had failed, for example, to like win the hearts and minds of the Ethereum community, then like I would be much more pessimistic about the longer term. But because we've succeeded, then makes me think this is happening. It's only a matter of time.
Do you ever regret not picking more discrete names for things like ComSwap?
No. Everybody who told me that like Spankchain was a terrible name was wrong. Everybody who told me that Moloch was a terrible name was wrong. Those people, and like to be honest, I do these things on purpose. Like I like to create mimetic filters. Like if you think Spankchain's a dumb name, I don't want to talk to you. So like go that way, right? Like I want to hang out with all the people who think Spankchain's a great idea and a great name, and like Moloch is interesting, and like ComSwap is hilarious, right? And like that's part of the beauty. Like we didn't even end up building ComSwap. It was just like a great joke. Like when I talked about it at DevCon 4, there was like a palpable silence, like 3 seconds, right? Because I was like, and now announcing decentralized exchange, ComSwap, and everyone's like,
uh-oh.
Yeah, there was this like very quick emotional progression. It was like he just said what I think he said. Oh God, is this okay? How are the people next to me reacting? And then like it was like, did they think it's okay? Is it okay if I think it's okay? And like everyone collectively was like, this is hilarious, right? And everyone died laughing. And I was like, great.
Yeah, you want to laugh, but you don't want to be the first one to laugh, probably.
Yeah, and like that's how it is, and like it takes triggering people. It takes starting these conversations. It takes getting everybody aware of the fact that it is fine, because if I didn't say these things, if I wasn't as provocative, we wouldn't incite the kinds of discussions that help everybody realize everybody else's positions on this, which is to say that most people don't give a fuck. Most people are fine. They want to see people, they not only end up embracing like Spankchain's norms, but also like our mission, which is like we're actually trying to bring technology that we all talk about, and we all want to use to save the world, but like to the one of the communities that actually would benefit from having it the most, and now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, when I do what the infrastructure you're building isn't that different in use case for, let's say, a journalist or somebody doing journalistic work in a very, very high or in a dangerous situation where you mentioned proton mail and payments and all those things are just standard behavior. So you can just, anyway. It was funny, by the way, you mentioned the mimetic filter, so to say. Right now I'm just diving into René Girard works from Peter Thiel. I was reading a little bit. I ordered his book, so I'm just going to dive into that because, anyway, it's just on the side note. I'm very, very excited to discover a bit more.
Pretty cool. And it's like the mimetics is like truth, or it's like people want what everyone else wants.
Yeah.
And like, that's the most powerful force, like the mimetics of desire.
Yeah. When you mentioned that mimetic filter, I was like, yeah, well, wait, I'm so okay. So I'll not go off in that direction. Just stick to the questions here. 3 more on Spankchain, then we move on. Where do you see Spankchain in 2 years?
As like there's like the optimistic scenario, right? Where it's like, the focusing on business has paid off. We have a strong international brand. Products that are getting a lot of adoption. We're ideally in 2 years, I would have like $100,000 a month revenue as our target, and so like we would be sort of break even, maybe a little even profitable as a company.
When you say break even, do you mean that you're no longer dependent on your ETH holdings, or I mean I know the traditional sense of break even, but what would that? How do you measure that?
You don't need outside investment. Like we're spending like $1 million a year, right? So if we're getting like 100,000 a month, that's like more than $1 million a year. So that's where I want to get to.
The pessimistic scenario?
I mean, it's we run out of money and I find a new job. So
is Spankchain researching privacy tech for the platform?
I'm watching all the privacy tech. Let me go back and answer the question again, because like it's not just like I want business things, like I want to be making money, like that's part of it. There's also I want like the acknowledgement of adoption in the adult industry. Like I want that to be the narrative. I want the narrative to be, holy shit, it's happening. Like people in the adult industry are using cryptocurrency transactionally for whatever they want, and like seeing double digit percentages of that demographic start to use crypto, because it's like 1% globally, right? It would be really interesting if there's small subsets that had much higher, like 20%. Of the community. I want to see like bigger adult businesses starting to consider crypto like to circumvent banks, because like they don't want it's not just performers who have trouble with banks. It's all adult businesses that frequently have like a whack-a-mole game that they're playing against the bankers. So shut this one down, open that one. It's happened to us a bunch of times. And like starting to see them like embedding crypto into their financial and accounting systems to like be able to store their money and DAI, for example. That would be really cool. There's a couple other products that we want to build beyond the basic stuff. I want to see like crypto start to work its way more into like social networking, like and not just like networking, like tools. So like one problem on Twitter, and it's like sort of similar to, on a cam site, is like on Twitter we have all these scam bots, right? And like part of the problem is that like the cost of building a new bot is very low. And if it costs like $1 or like $10 to create a Twitter account, not that you would have to spend it, but it's a deposit and you can get it back whenever you want. If you leave, well, then like if you had some sort of TCR where somebody was incentivized by some fraction of the deposit that was placed, and then like if you helped identify the scam bot, you get that, then you'd have a lot fewer scam bots because it wouldn't make economic sense. And like the same type of thing for doing moderation for like a cam show. 4chan comes in and like raids my cam shows every now and then, and like calls people names, and if I was like a totally detached from the situation, it might even be funny to rejoice in someone's misery, but like when it's in my house, it's not. So we kick them out, we ban them, we build the moderation tools. But like if they had to place a deposit of like $10 to be able to chat in this room, and then if somebody kicks you out, like it's the the owner of the room decides, then like great, you can keep coming back and calling me names, and I'll just keep making money off of it.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like embedding the financial layer into our products for more like everyday type things will be cool. Yeah. Okay. So privacy stuff. I'd also love to see privacy. I follow a lot of it. As far as I can tell, there's a couple solutions. Like you can have like ZK dot, like the Aztec protocol to do those types of private transactions, but they hide the amounts and not the addresses of the people involved, which isn't optimal. And then there's like mixers, but those can also be gamed if you like own a lot of, if the NSA decides to cycle its money through it, then they figure out who the other people are more easily. It's like how they run most of the Tor. And then payment channels is actually a privacy solution too, because all anybody sees is that your money went into the contract and that's it, right? Sometime later, maybe you withdrew less money, and like some performer, they went to the chain and they withdrew more money than they started with through payment channels. And so like custodial solutions and payment channels sort of have that centralized privacy aspect to them. So I'm following the privacy stuff, and I think it'll be really important, especially for like more like towards escort side, but definitely for cam performers as well, and users. Users get like this, pseudonymity of not having to like associate with their credit card or bank account or whatever. But like it's still sort of traceable. So like if I had like a coin tumbler that everybody used in order to even like that was embedded in Spankchain, and like a whole bunch of sites used it to like every time somebody makes a transaction, it gets tumbled, and you pay an extra, I don't know, small fee for the gas of doing that or something, then like everybody would have a little bit better privacy, but that's like a hard coordination problem.
What's the role of Spankchain in the ecosystem regarding the regarding grants and donations or donations?
Spankchain has a very small role. We've received grants and made grants. So I gave grants to. I like sponsored some counterfactual state channels work last year when Spankchain had more money. Gave like $25,000 grant to Prismatic Labs to work on ETH 2.0, like March of last year, so like a year ago. Maybe it was a little later, I can't remember exactly. And then gave like $50,000 grant to Machinemy, who built our initial payment channel library to do more counterfactual research. And then we, in the latest news, received $420,000 as a grant from the Ethereum Foundation for the payment channel work. I've been a technical advisor on some of the grants, like somebody in the EF text me and they're like, hey, what do you think of this? And so I played a small role. I've offered to play a larger role. And like, we're going to possibly play a larger role through the Moloch DAO. I think that one of the best, situations that could happen is like a bunch of companies, ICOs that depend on Ethereum and want to, make it move faster, like pool their treasuries as well. And like larger holders come in. Right now there's about, I guess I'm skipping ahead to some of the other questions on the Moloch, but there's 2,200 ETH. There's 22 founders. Everybody put in 100 Ether, so there's about $275,000 pooled, and we're starting to issue grants. The first vote will pass today, and that'll be to fund Kyokan for the State of ETH 2.0 report that I commissioned them to write. That helped spur some of the, speeding up the process on ETH 2.0.
All right. Is it okay if we first talk a little bit about Ethereum and governance and the subreddits, and then come back to Moloch DAO?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So let's switch gears to Ethereum. What's one of the biggest misconceptions that you've seen over the years with respect to Ethereum, both the protocol and the projects building on it?
Misconceptions about Ethereum and people building on it. I mean, I've seen a lot of people like do things wrong. I've seen a lot of people underestimate the complexity of building things, and so they get in there and they're like, "We're going to build this thing that's going to do all these things," and then it doesn't. Like it's too hard to do that securely, pay for the audit, etc. So it's like a lot easier to build and a lot cheaper to build simple things. It's like something like Uniswap is a great example. It's like not a very they like picked sane defaults for their parameters. They didn't like add governance. They just let you join and leave whenever you want. It's a good system. People also really underestimate like scalability limits, and so they don't design their dApps to scale. But like for Spankchain, like scalability has never been a huge concern because we just built our own payment channels. And so when I get pitched by like other blockchain projects, they're like, you should use this. And I'm like, actually, I have more scalability than you do because I have infinite scalability because I have payment channels. They have zero latency. Like you still have some stupid proof of whatever algorithm. So like, I don't know. That's probably the biggest misconceptions. People just like don't know how to build things on it yet because it's so new. So they have some strange ideas.
When you first, sorry,
we talked to CryptoKitties team when they like broke the network, and they're like, "What do we do?" And I was like, "Well, you should have thought about this." Like they could have designed a verification game, for example, where like the CryptoKitty breeding was like the computationally intensive thing that they had everybody doing and paying for. But it's like they could have just made it so that you publish the results. And then they have sort of a side game where people can look at the results, and they have a little node you can run. And if the result is incorrect, then you challenge it. And only in the case where it is incorrect, then do you do the verification on chain, right? And that would have saved them 95% of their gas cost.
When you first came across Ethereum, what was your reaction or interpretation? How has that lined up with where we are today?
I first found out about Ethereum when I was living on the balcony of a rationalist house in Berkeley. And it was like shortly after reading Meditations on Moloch and being like, oh my God, coordination problems. Like this is, the big
is that the Star Slate Codex post?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's what inspired a lot of my recent work. And also what sort of made me understand what Ethereum is. When I found out about it, I was like, this is not just, a platform for for transactions like Bitcoin, like this is a coordination platform. This will, when it is ready, reduce the cost of human coordination and allow like more interesting, types of organizations to emerge and emerge more quickly. And so I thought that was really cool, and I wanted to figure out how to harness it. And so like I'm going to talk about Moloch again, but like just so built a DAO, it's a grants DAO. But like just the thought of like getting 20 of your friends together to pool $10,000 like into something that you can then vote on doing and then like remove your money. Like imagine the just the paperwork and the legal fees of doing that in the legacy like on the U.S. government stack, the technology stack, which is like, let's print an LLC, like let's do all, it's like sort of dumb, right? And it'd take a long time and it'd be really, really expensive. And it's like, I can do that cheaper now. I can do that much cheaper now. And the fact that I've already done it means that anybody else who comes after me can like copy the code and then they can do it even cheaper because this is all open source. And like, that means that, in general, the cost of coordination is going to drop astronomically. And so we should be expecting to see more and more, like growth that outpaces anything we've seen before, because we can use incentive alignment like as a primitive, like on our programming language. Like I can be like move money. Like Solidity is one of the only languages. It was one of the first that allowed you to do that. So I guess. How has that changed over time? It hasn't. It's just like at the beginning when I got out, it was sort of greenfield. Nobody knew what they were doing, and it took me a minute to realize that nobody knew what they were doing. And now, still nobody knows what they're doing, but like some people know a little bit better. And so it's still very early. We still haven't even seen like I knew that like what ConsenSys was doing right before I joined. I was like, oh, these guys figured it out. They're building like the Unix philosophy for dApps. Right, they want to build a bunch of modules that can like plug into each other, and that makes total sense to me. But like what we didn't realize is like what those were and how long it would take to get them. But like having something like DAI, having something like Uniswap, having eventually things like Uport, play with the Gnosis Safe, play with all their other products. Like this is what makes an ecosystem work.
Aragon, not to mention Aragon.
Aragon, yeah. Oh. When you have DAOs that can act as individual agents, like that's so cool. That totally changes, like like how dApps development works. Because now you're not like, oh, I'm going to build my thing. It's like, how can I leverage these 5 existing frameworks in order to do something even more interesting?
Mm. Would you be interested to be the release coordinator and/or have an active role in the core dev calls?
I don't really know what that entails. Like suffice to say, the answer at this time is no. I have a day job. I should probably keep doing my day job. Maybe sometime in the future, I'd be more interested. But yeah, I feel like the core dev calls are also like a lot of work, and I'm I've played a little bit of a increased role in the community in the last couple weeks, months, but mostly that's like because I see the difference between like what the prevailing narratives are and what I think they should be, like acknowledging competition, acknowledging that price is important, stuff like that, and I saw the opportunity to contribute meaningfully to that, and like I don't think there's a whole lot else in the short term, and I think like I could serve the community best by just like focusing on making Spankchain work and like get adoption.
Do you believe some of the rumors that the free rage quit and various other activities was a socially engineered PR stunt?
I don't know to how much it was planned and to what extent it was like just opportunistic or to what extent it was genuine. I don't really trust people that often, so like when I see something like that happen, I tend to wonder. I'm like, well, what if he did plan it, right? Like, how would this have turned out if this was what he wanted? And so it's like, you know, I think like the reaction from like the very, you know, the tree huggy hippie, like, you know, Ethereum nice people was like protective, right? It was like, oh, how dare you guys? You know, you said mean things on the internet to this guy, and it's like, you know, he wasn't. He was provocative on purpose, right? Like he could have raised the question quietly. He could have said something, you know, hey, like here are the reasons that I think, you know, pros and cons. Like I want Ethereum to do really well, so like, you know, is there any way to incorporate the technology? But he didn't. He was like, you know, Polkadot's sharding is better than Ethereum's. Come at me, bro. Right? Or like prove me wrong or whatever. Right? And it's like when you do something like that, like what were you actually expecting? Um, like, and so it's like if you didn't expect it, he was dumb for not expecting it. If he did expect it, then it would have behooved him to realize what was going to happen and then how he could get sympathy from it. Not saying that's what he did. What I'm saying is like that's what my suspicions would, you know, lead me to wonder. And like because of his absence, because then he used the opportunity to rage quit. You know, what I'm thinking is like, you know, if you're planning on rage quitting anyway, what better way to do it than like to get the sympathy for all those people before you go? It's like that's what makes me think it might have been planned, but like I have no evidence, right? This is all conjecture. Like Afri seems like a chill dude. Like I've met him before, and like at ETH Buenos Aires. But like I also know that, you know, him and all the rest of the Polkadot team are like capable of shiesty shit, and like it's not like out of the question that they might socially engineer something like this, because like what I was talking to Afri about when I met him was like, hey man, let's fork Ethereum. This wasn't a good idea, by the way, but I was like, hey, let's fork Ethereum and like set EOS's balance to zero, because they've got like $1 billion sitting in one account. And here's the plan: we'll restore all of Polkadot's locked funds if you guys make this change, and we'll secretly hard fork and dump all the old chain on everybody while the new chain gets listed, and like everybody will have the option of like either staying on the chain with EOS to get dumped on by EOS, or like moving on. Like, which one are you going to value? I thought that'd be funny, but like, you know, the coordination overhead of that is significant, and the wiser, you know, more responsible community leaders were like, no, that's a terrible idea. Like, you're going to completely eliminate the confidence in, you know, the immutability and like whatever, like special state transitions in the Ethereum protocol. But like, they were down, right? That's what I mean. So like, that's yeah. I don't know. This stuff can get pretty Game of Thrones, right? Like, and like everybody who doesn't think that is like living in a little fantasy bubble.
Yeah, and they have a few $100 million incentive to whatever it is they might be doing. Like the EIP 999 just keeps coming up, and those kind of discussions. It's kind of hard to see from the outside, or hard to.
Yeah, you think, okay, you know, they're bringing this up, they care, like, it's like, yeah, I get it, you know, they have money at stake, but like they're also incurring a cost on everybody, and it's much less of a cost to them. So it's like,
yeah, they're socializing the cost by just splitting the community in some way, I guess.
Right.
Yeah. So let's jump into the Ryan Zur discussions.
Our next question.
Yeah, I'm leading you down a bad hole, but I'm thinking about it, but I'm just reading people's questions, so I'm completely innocent. So this is a post somebody wrote. So what are your thoughts on our Ethereum and the mod situation? They seem very apathetic, burned down, and misaligned with most of the discussion around Polkadot and Ryan Zur. Taylor Monahan basically killed the conversation with a fake attempt at engagement, and that was the end of it. No further follow-up has been made, and Ryan Zur continues to sit as a moderator. Nobody in a visible position of leadership appears to give a fuck about public opinion regarding all of this. I worry the situation will fester and cause a much greater explosive reaction the next time there's a conflict of interest with Parity and company. What do you think? Do you have anything to add about how this matter was handled?
So I'm actually going to disagree. I think thus far it was handled pretty well. Like, I think that it's hard to like manage people, manage process. Taylor is a CEO a company. She's used to this. She knows that if they responded quickly, even like I was, publicly requesting Ryan Zur step down as a mod. He has not. God knows why. If it's such like an administrative, dumb task, like no idea why he hasn't just done that. But with Taylor, like had she like responded to our request to remove him, then like it would have shown us that we can make angry demands at the mods and then they listen to us. And so instead, what she was doing, I don't think it was like a fake attempt at a discussion. I think it was a genuine attempt at discussion. And I thought that the most productive way that anybody in the community could engage was to publish, their thoughts. Like she was asking for us to come up with a set of rules by which to evaluate moderators, so that the next time this happened, they could look at the rules that we created. And that's much more scalable, right? Because as much as I want, him gone, I also don't want to do this every week, right? Nobody wants to do this every week. And so I totally agree with her in how she handled it. I thought she handled it very well. It remains to be seen if there will be action based on the feedback. If, for example, in the next, I don't know, week, 2 weeks, whatever, like everybody has jobs here, right? It's not like this is what we do full time, like moderate. But like if in the next couple of weeks, like they say, okay, here are the feedback that we got, here are the policies that we're going to put in place for the moderators, then like I would be satisfied, right? And like the only policy suggestion I made was like people who have significant conflicts of interest, like work for competing blockchain, don't let them be moderators. And I went down the list, and like the only one that I saw that it would affect was Ryan. Like it wouldn't even have affected Afri, because like Afri was working for Parity, funded by both Polkadot and the Ethereum Foundation through grants, working primarily with Ethereum people on Ethereum things. So he was like more Ethereum leaning than otherwise. If he was primarily the release manager for Polkadot, and if he was contributing mostly code to Polkadot and like not building test nets for them, then like sure, maybe he shouldn't be a mod of our Ethereum. But it wouldn't have proactively removed him up until the point that he like quit. And like at that point, then you should be removed for inactivity or whatever. But yeah, I thought I'm optimistic, I guess, that the process is going to work.
Do ETH holders have a coordination problem? Like, do you have any advice for people in the ETH Trader sub who want to participate more actively in ensuring the best outcome for their investment? Yeah,
I mean, the distribution of Ether is super broad now, right? So there's a lot of people who have an incentive to make this work. ETH Trader is a very crude tool to try and push your governance agenda. I would say absolutely we need better tools to coordinate as a community of stakeholders. Somebody like Fred Wilson, big investor, Union Square Ventures, they're like, Ethereum's blowing it. I just want to have a meeting of like, people who hold 20 or 30% of the assets so we can, figure some things out. And I would love to see that. I would love to see, ETH holders coordinate better. Like some of the easy, maybe not easy, but like lower hanging fruits, like signaling, right? Maybe we don't go all the way down the spectrum and put everything on like on-chain governance like Polkadot or Tezos, but like maybe it's useful for us as a community to know where the larger ETH holders stand on certain issues like ProgPow or, Ryan Zur as a moderate. I mean, I doubt they'd really care about that. But like, things like that, right? Issuance reduction, inflation funding for development. These are all like sort of contentious issues. And without proper signaling, it's really easy to dilute the signal that comes from the holders, because like I could just be an anonymous Reddit troll or some Twitter account and like say a bunch of stuff, and like there's no way for those people to talk to besides signaling, there's also like two or three different teams I know working on like chat rooms for whales, where like you have to prove that you have at least, I don't know, 100,000 ether to get in, and that would be really cool, because then each of those people may have some ideas, like here's what we should do, here's what we should, but like they don't have the means to implement it, and they don't know what everybody else is thinking, and this is like a larger group of stakeholders than I think many of them are used to, because they're used to like being like private investors in a company where like they have a board seat, right? And so, not saying they should have a board seat, but it'd also be helpful to hear their feedback.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how that works, because Vitalik is probably my only reference point, and he holds about, I don't know, 70, 80,000 ether in that address that everybody knows about. So I'm just trying to, and I would say that Vitalik, his reaction to this whole Ethereum thing was like, we have more important things to do, or maybe that's not what he said, but he said something like, I'm concerned about the tech, not about these like the ProcPo discussion, and even the whole Ethereum discussion. It's like, yeah, I mean, fine, but that's not one of my main concerns right now.
And I love that, because a large part of my motivation of doing it is like try to save Vitalik's time as much as possible. Like the less that he needs to get involved with this stuff, the faster we'll move. So like, I don't know, maybe this is foolish, but like, at least part of the motivation is like helping save him and save the other devs time. Because like, it might take me a couple days to like talk like make an argument for removing Ryan as a mod or something, but like they've been bringing up EIP 999 for like the better part of 18 months. Like that has an enormous social cost on the community and the developers and Vitalik. Just dealing with all of that every day, not every day, but like every couple weeks back up. So yeah, they do have more important things to do, and like it would be great if like we could just keep them busy, so that and maybe not me, I have some things to do too, but like people who are more speculators and like community members and have strong opinions, like it'd be great to have them like have our backs and be like the first line of defense against social attacks.
What would you need to see happen on Polkadot or not happen on Ethereum in order to make the decision to migrate?
So I bought some dots. I was pretty transparent about that. I think that, even though Ryan Zur is like I mean, sort of lost some respect for him and just how he's handled this. Like, I don't think he'll be a good community manager for Polkadot either. But like Gavin's team has crushed it. They're shipping great technology. I'm excited to like learn Rust and use Substrate and play around with it. I think one day, it could even plug into Ethereum directly and not need to go through Polkadot as your only source of security. So I think there's, positive sum outcomes here. But like with respect to, what would I have to know to like switch for something like Spankchain? It's really hard because one of the best things about Ethereum is permissionless innovation, right? Like before I was working on Ethereum, I was working on like the Twitter API, and it was like hanging over my head, that at any time Twitter could just come and just, axe me. And like I would have a similar sense of anxiety working on Polkadot unless I felt really confident in, their governance norms, that it was like very, very bad or frowned upon. Collectively everybody decided to kick off an adult DApp or DApp chain because historically the adult industry has ended up on the other side of ConsenSys, and like ConsenSys in general like has its advantages and disadvantages. One of them is like minorities are suppressed. Right, that's what it tends to be unless you build that into your consensus algorithm, which is like sort of what Ethereum did. It's like if Ethereum wants to kick me out, kick Spankchain out, literally every single node has to hard fork and adopt a different piece of software that has me out. And like it's much easier on something like Polkadot. So that's what gives me the biggest concern. If they were more friendly to that, then I would be more open to putting some of our infrastructure on their chain. But I'd also have to there's this like philosophical angle to it too, where it's like, you know, the reason that like a lot of us are doing this like isn't to get rich. It's like I want Spankchain to work because I think it's important for the adult industry, for Ethereum, for crypto, and like, you know, I want that community to make I want the company to be financially, you know, sustainable and so forth. But like, you know, part of like choosing the platform that you build on is also like deciding whose values you lend your effort to. Like, let me explain. Like somebody like Vitalik, right? When I talked to him about like what he would want to do if he wasn't working on Ethereum, he's like, yeah, I would want to do like immortality research. And like somebody like Gavin, like I don't think he has as lofty ambitions. Like I think he would drink like fancier beer and like have a good time, and like, but I don't think he would like try to save the world, you know. Whereas like, and so, you know, Vitalik, like maybe there's an argument to be made that like by working on Ethereum, by helping give him more leverage in the world, because if Ethereum works, then he's wealthier and he has the ability to do more things. Like maybe the fate of humanity depends on Ethereum winning, right? Like maybe we discover immortality faster. And like, I know I sound crazy when I talk about this kind of thing, but like when you have the opportunity to pick your leaders, when you have the opportunity to pick the people that you empower, like you know, I want to do it for the people that are the most aligned with my values too. So I would also need to see and like Vitalik and Joe, you know, have mentioned Spankchain, embrace Spankchain to some extent, and like, you know, I would have to see something similar from Polkadot or whatever, you know, if they want our participation as well, right? I'm not going to go to Polkadot and be like the weird kid that's like, you know, everybody sort of just deals with, right? Because like, fuck you, right? Like, you know, I don't need you, you know, I'll just chill. For other things, I'm interested, like, you know, DAO structures, like Aragon building on Polkadot as a signal. If a lot of the easy governance libraries migrate, then it'll be easier to build governance things on Substrate or whatever than it would be on Ethereum. Then like there will be a period of time where before you can like plug Substrate back in, that, you know, you might use Polkadot for security or something. So yeah.
I'm just looking at the clock. Do you have some more time? I mean, there's still a whole chapter on the Moloch DAO, and you were mentioning.
Let's keep going. Fuck it.
Okay, so let me ask two more questions on the Ethereum and the government stuff, and then move on over to the Moloch DAO, because you mentioned Substrate and you talked about it on the POV crypto, one of the things you could fund. But let's just two more questions. Let's see. I'm not sure if the premise is correct for this one, but if Polkadot also uses the EWASM design, is it? It seems plausible that products and services could migrate from Ethereum to Polkadot. Is this true?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't know if it'd be like fully compatible out of the box. I think that's what the question's asking. So I guess my answer is like, I'm not really sure. I'm assuming that if they adopt the compiler that makes it possible, then yes. So, but I don't know the nuances of like what it takes to implement EWASM on their WASM, or, you know, compile the Solidity natively.
What do you think Ethereum's greatest weaknesses or threats are, and how can it overcome them? Plus, where do you see Ethereum in the next 2 to 5 years?
Probably Ethereum's greatest threat is like its identity crisis. Like, who is Ethereum? Like, is Ethereum ConsenSys? Is it the Ethereum Foundation? Is it, you know, the companies that ICO'd and have a lot of Ether? And it's like, without those groups coordinating to push Ethereum to the next level, then the risk is that Ethereum gets, you know, outcompeted by teams that are more centralized, they don't have as much like coordination overhead, and like projects get like sniped one by one to go to other platforms, either for financial reasons or just because there was sort of a lack of coordination happening in the ETH community. That's probably one of the bigger risks. Not non-delivery on ETH 2.0 is another risk. We were all promised when we started this journey that like things would get better. Proof of stake was going to come, and then sharding, and then like there was Jasper, and the roadmaps got merged, and things 3 years later, it's like still 2 years out. It's like, okay, well, there's only so long this can happen before the technological lead that Ethereum had that made us all work on it to begin with is surpassed. So like this is sort of part of what I was saying on POV crypto. It's like when you want to work on Bitcoin, it's like very hard. It takes a lot of time for a developer to do anything useful. That time has a cost. It's a very lucrative skill set, and so you can actually measure like the cost of building any dApp by like the amount of time it takes the developers to do it and like how skilled they need to be, right? And so like if Ethereum does not get better at a rate that's comparable to other platforms, and like the cost will increase, like the relative cost will be lower to implement things on other platforms, even if they make trade-offs that we don't like more centralization on EOS or governance on Polkadot or something, right? So those are the risks.
2 to 5 year outlook?
I'm optimistic. I think ETH 2.0 phase 2 will ship in the next like 2.5 years, like before the end of 2021. I mean, the plan is phase 0 end of this year, phase 1 end of 2020, phase 2 end of 2021. But I guess I'm more optimistic than that. Like I see things accelerating in the space. I see Ethereum not like backing down, but stepping up. And so I'm I don't know, buying more ETH because like what I see is that the sentiment is all of the people who are buying other things are like not buying. It's like because they don't believe that this is all going to work, and I do believe that this is all going to work. So I think they'll eventually have to believe that it's working because it'll be the evidence will be right in front of them. And I think it's really historically, like Ethereum has gone through these periods of being completely underestimated and then blowing everyone out of the water. I think that's what's going to happen. Like I think some value might flow out of Ethereum during into Cosmos and Polkadot and Tezos or whatever, right? All of these interop chains and so forth. But then like you can't beat security network effects. You can't beat like interoperability network effects. Like for smart contracts to just plug in other smart contracts, like the cost of doing that is much lower than like the cost of building something on another chain that then has to like go through a series of hops in order to get to like some contract it wants to interact with. Like that kind of thing will make value accrue back to Ethereum, especially once like proof of stake and sharding are done, because that's like where a lot of the uncertainty comes from. I think central banks in 5 years are going to be like building on Ethereum and like issuing, not necessarily the big ones first, probably the small ones first, but like issuing their own digital currencies for their whole countries, and using Ethereum as like their settlement layer. I think that's like the bull case. So for me anyway, because then if you're already depending on the system, then you might as well buy some ETH and stake it and help secure it.
What's more interesting, working on Spankchain or the Moloch DAO project?
Moloch was a side project, right? Like I'm a Spankchain maximalist. I have a lot of fun working on Spankchain. I've learned a lot working on Spankchain. In terms of the people I get to meet and talk to, Moloch is like me and a bunch of my friends from ConsenSys, and like a bunch of people in ETH get together and It's like a science experiment, right? We're like trying to see if we can like do this funding thing. So I think probably working on Spankchain is more fun. Maybe Moloch will get more fun. Like my ideal scenario for Moloch is like 3 to 5 years from now or whatever. I'm like sitting in a virtual reality guild meeting with several hundred or several thousand people, and we're like deciding like what Web 2.0 company we want to like destroy that day. That would be like my ideal scenario. We're like, should we take down, PayPal today? Okay, all systems go.
The Moloch DAO goal is to solve the quote tragedy of the commons problem. Sorry, I have to reread the phrase. The Moloch DAO goal to solve the tragedy of the commons problem is a very ambitious one. How does blockchain technology make it easier to turn such thought experiments into real-world experiments?
I think I actually answered this question before, where I was like, imagine how hard it would be for me to go like do all the paperwork to get a bank and like set up a company. And it's like the coordination cost is what's really important there. Making it cheaper for people to align their incentives and to like pool capital and make decisions about how to spend that capital will have really really interesting long-term effects. I think so. How does it make it so? It's just like it makes the coordination cost cheaper. That's like the base answer, right? It's like the real world analogy to doing this would be way more expensive, both in terms of the time and the money. And so like one of my other theses is like, if you accept the premise that, the most that like, coordination costs in general are going to drop by like 10, 100,000 times. And like the most disruptive opportunities in the space are the ones that require unprecedented levels of coordination, because it's coordination at a scale that people previously thought was impossible that is now like feasible and cheap. And so if you're looking for those, you'll do well. Like it would have been weird to say, a bunch of people are going to get together, all over the world and decide to value and contribute to this network, which has like a embedded virtual machine that can act as a settlement layer for all of our transactions and even allow us to program our money. Right. But like this global movement happened and faster than everybody expected because it was able to like self-select for the people who wanted that. And they should say, what, I'm going to spend my life working on this because like this is the way that I'm going to achieve like what I want in life, what I like. This is going to make the world that I want more likely, and so people contribute, and like because it's open, it's permissionless. Like they don't have to sign up, they don't have to talk to anybody. They can just like write some smart contracts.
Well, somebody wrote this. Now that you mentioned the ease of signing up, the Moloch DAO is live, but information on participating is pretty technical. Is it intended to be exclusive towards technical folk, or what is the current status of the DAO as far as? Sorry, those are two separate questions. So, is it intended to be exclusive towards technical people?
No, there's a bunch of non-technical people in it too that just like have a bunch of ETH and want to see ETH do well, and like I think it'll be fine. Basically the only rule is that you just have to get voted in by the existing members. So like you can't just join. Somebody who's already in has to submit a proposal for you. So like because of that.
How do you define you? Is it like, do you say, well, this Ether address or this person? Like, can you keep your anonymity?
You can keep your anonymity. You just have to make, a good enough argument for why everyone should accept you.
I have a particularly beautiful Ether address is probably not
right.
Not a reason.
But it's, if somebody comes to me and then I'm like, okay, I'll keep your, anonymity, but like, I'll vouch for you and I'll say, here are some characteristics of this individual. I trust them very highly, right? Then it's sort of like, how do you buy drugs, right? You're like, I got a buddy, and then you're like, somebody's like, is he legit? And I'm like, yeah, he's legit, right? That's like all you really need to know.
What is the current? This was a follow-up question from the same person. What is the current status of the DAO as far as assets, members, and proposals?
Yeah, 22 members, about to be 23. Each person came in with 100 ethers, so 2,200 ETH, $275,000. The first proposal was submitted to pay Kyokan back for the State of ETH 2.0 report, and that's $3,000, and the voting ends today. And so if that passes, they'll be the first member that got in through a grant.
Just so those 22 members have to sign off on it individually, or is there a quorum, or how does that work?
There's a 7-day voting period, and so long as there's more yes votes than no votes, it passes. And then at the end of that, there's a 7-day grace period, and you have the opportunity to exit. You can rage quit the guild. So there's a function on the smart contract called rage quit. You have 100 shares. Your shares are a claim. They're both a claim on the capital and your votes. So if there's, let's say, 10,000 shares outstanding and you have 100, you have 1%. If there's $10,000 worth of ETH, you rage quit your 100 shares, you get $100, right? So during the grace period, if you have not voted yes on anything that is in the voting or grace period, you can take your ball and go home. It's meant for people to be able to say, the biggest problem that you have when you join a grants DAO is like, how do I know that all of the other people who might have more votes than me aren't going to bully me in order to like spend my money in a way that I don't want? And the way you solve that is like, well, let everybody leave at any time, and now that problem doesn't matter.
But you have to be voted back in if you would like to rejoin, right? So
yeah,
that's a problem.
Good luck like dodging the draft and then coming back. Like
yeah.
You'd have to make a really convincing argument. You might even have to pay more money than it would have been if you'd stayed.
But following up to this, when will I, a pseudonymous but very pro Ethereum user and ETH trader, be allowed to join your Moloch DAO guild with a modest contribution of something like 10 Ether?
Yeah, so long as you can convince us that you're not like an enemy, then it's fine. And this is also, to be more specific, this is like for the first version. In the first version, I optimized heavily for simplicity. I didn't want to introduce a bunch of mechanisms that one would impair the social scalability. Like I'd have to explain it to everybody, and then I also have to get them audited and make sure they work properly. In the future, I could see an upgrade allowing us to like force rage quit somebody, which means like you get your money back, but we also don't want you here anymore. And in that situation, it might be a lot more lenient to outside people who are more anonymous, because the total downside is much lower. Whereas right now, if somebody joins anonymously and they defect, then what they can do is like spam the proposal queue. The anti-spam mechanisms aren't like that good. You basically lock up 10 Ether for 2 weeks when you submit a proposal, and you get it back, right? So it's not that expensive to like clog the proposal queue, and what everybody else has to do is everybody else who's already in has to rage quit, because there's no upgrade mechanism on this thing. There's another way to save on complexity and auditing costs is like the upgrade mechanism is everybody rage quits and we deploy a new contract and then we put our money in that, right? This is not like designed to be a sustainable thing forever. It's designed to be like planned obsolescence. Like this thing will close down one day and we will move to a new contract. Moloch is far more about the social coordination than it is a specific smart contract, right? But the smart contract implementation means that like it's harder to get more anonymous people in for now than it might be later when we have better safeguards in place.
Do you think a Moloch type DAO would be an appropriate way to hold funds in the ENS system, perhaps instead of the current proposal where deposits and rent would be held in a multi-sig and dispersed by its root key holders as they see fit for development grants? Development could instead be voted on individually and funded through grant submittals. Yeah, I think, if you decide to rage quit because you dislike the direction of development, you also release your ENS name. This could also mitigate the tax implications they currently face that is seen as income as soon as it enters a multi-sig.
It's a very complicated question. I don't think I know enough about ENS to really answer. But
by the way, I don't know enough about it either to paraphrase the question in an easier form, so I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So I'm going to skip that one.
Okay, so these were 3 questions from the same person. I'll just read the second one. The white paper describes a scenario where in a contentious vote, only no voters may rage quit. Can no voters also choose to stay in the guild after voting and during the grace period, effectively leaving their options open? Is this attack vector mitigated in any other way than socially? For example, guild members may not let someone that acts in this way mint new shares in the guild.
I think it's like if you vote no on everything, that's like maybe a dominant strategy, because then you can always leave. I think it'd be pretty obvious to everybody if you were just like no voting on everything. And so maybe, the social repercussion would be like, fine, well, we're all going to vote no on anything you want. Or like if we, make a new DAO, we're not going to let you in. But it's also like, I mean, the point of joining something like this is to spend the money on, grants. So like, it's sort of like, I guess I don't understand like who would do this, who would come in and like vote no on everything. Like that, after getting admitted to a grants DAO, I decided to try and prevent all the grants from happening. So yeah, that's a weird edge case. It's certainly possible though. To vote no on everything, and does keep your options open. You don't have to force them to leave, but like that's what I mean. If you had I submit a proposal to like kick this person out, then it's a lot easier to deal with stuff like that than it is right now. But I'm enjoying. I didn't want to put a lot of things in the first version without having these discussions, because having these discussions has been really helpful, and like having a lot more people like simulating different game theoretic edge cases is really helpful to understand what to prioritize for the next version.
Mm-hmm. Just wondering, where does the main conversation happen? Is it a group? Is it some Discord channel? Where is it actually happening?
There's a Telegram group.
Okay, that's the main source. There's a Telegram group.
It's small enough. It's 22 people right now, so it's there's not a lot of overhead. Sometimes we move discussions. Like we had a really funny discussion about whether or not we should let Ryan Zur in because wanted to join, and people sort of collectively decided. Some people wanted yes, some people voted no. We all sort of shared our opinions. After seeing our conversation publicly, people sort of changed their opinions. Weren't as excited about having him in. Seemed to recognize that he was playing a game. So, like, I forget what I was saying. The discussions. Yeah, so we used some other tool where people could like signal yes and no. I forget what it was called, but it was also a private group. And then we'll probably have like, I was talking to Relevant, talking to some other sort of like, discussion platform things to link those to the proposals on our site. Ideally, you'd want to have like a forum where like there's a post for every proposal, and then they can have threaded discussions within that. But then you might also want to flag, which is like some of these are public and some of these are private to people who are already in. Some of these are just like, welcoming community feedback. Like, we're thinking about doing a grant for this. Like, what do you guys think, community? Like, help fill in the blanks of what we understand.
If the Moloch DAO fails, what would be the cause of that failure?
Probably we let somebody in that defects and spam. Or like we all just piss each other off somehow and like everyone rage quits. Or like I do something dumb publicly and like people don't want to associate with Moloch anymore. Like these are all things to consider.
This is a more general question from the same guy who has the 2 longer questions. Do you think that the lack of price promotion by the Ethereum Foundation and leaders in the space could be out of fear of being accused of promoting Ether as a profitable investment and thus a security, rather than thinking price is not important to security or of the network, perhaps what you are doing by independently saying these things is exactly what the system needs, as the core devs cannot do it themselves. Actually, I just figured out this question is not related to Moloch DAO. I just forgot to put it in with the other question. So this is on the ETH price and the security issue.
Maybe if the Ethereum Foundation was like championing, hey everybody, buy ETH, like we want you to raise the price of Ether to make it more secure, right? They might have some trouble. So maybe it has to be somebody else, right? Has to be like the court jester or whatever, right? Like I run the porn company and I come out there and just start making sense all of a sudden, and so for them, like maybe it's a security concern. It's also like they have the the halo effect, right? Like they're blessed by the gods, or so to speak. So it's hard for them to they have to manage their perception very carefully, right? And like the price conversation is something that's like pretty nuanced. And like the reason that I wanted to talk about price appreciation was to separate the two categories of price talk. Where there's one category of price talk, which is like the daily fluctuations, went $1 up, went $5 down, no one gives a shit, like go back to work, right? And then there's the other category of price conversation, which is like, how do we plan for and intentionally like design for long-term value accrual? And it's like existentially important to have that conversation, because if we can't have that conversation because we're afraid of being confused for the other conversation, then we're fucked. Like if I try to talk about like how are we going to keep the price high over time, and somebody's like, stop talking about the price, this is weird, right? Then like that's a big problem. So part of what I was trying to do is reduce the stigma, and it's hard for somebody like the EF to do that on their own. I don't know to what extent it's like a securities thing, but like I would understand that being partially a concern.
If you have a weekend to relax and unwind, what do you do? By the way, these are the closing questions. We went through the Moloch DAO. Unless there's something else you want to add about the project that people didn't ask.
Not really. I'll give a shameless plug for Nomic Labs, because they were kind enough to do a free security audit, and they did a really great job. So check them out. I mean, I guess like steal my code, like fork Moloch, run your own experiment, get all your friends together, and like try something, right? Like that's all I would say. Like I think the point of Moloch is like to try and show people that this can be real, that this this can work on Ethereum today, and try to inspire people to build their own systems around it. And if you are, reach out. Happy to talk. But to relax and unwind, it's funny that you say that, because like the only real vacation I took in the last like year was spending like 2 weeks in a coding hole making Moloch, and like writing all the smart contract, like the final stretch of that. Like I saw my sister during it, and she was like, I can't believe you finally took a vacation, and now you're just like, taking stimulants and like writing smart contract tests for like your side project. Like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, I don't know. This is just fun for me. Like, this is what I like to do. So, how do I relax and unwind? I play PUBG.
What's PUBG?
It's like Fortnite. It's one of those like survival games.
Okay.
Where you have to be like the last person standing to win. It makes me feel like when you get in the lobby of that game, it's like you and 99 other people. And like the mindset you have to have is that everyone else needs to die for you to win. And I think that's really
seems like you learned something from Joe Lubin and Zero Sum Games.
There's a lot to be said for that. Like it's sort of how I feel when I look at CoinMarketCap. Everyone else, So yeah, it's I like to do that. I don't know. When I'm in Venice, I live by the beach, so just tend to hang out by the beach and do Venice beach things. I don't like go out that often. Yeah.
There was So this is a question. I will try to read it, but I don't know what the question is about. So I'm just going to read what the guy submitted. This was Trent Van Epps who submitted the question. You like the Sparta meme. However, this is partially at odds with the historic public image of Ethereum as unicorns and or quirky. How can we transform these magical creatures, the unicorns, I guess, into beasts of war without descending into the self-parody that is Bitcoin's meat/guns/gold mantra of community fracturing due to a loss of vision? We can still be some type of unicorn in the end, just more like the Uniswap branding.
We need like quirky Spartans, right?
But can you just explain a little bit what you mean with the Sparta meme? Because I'm out of the loop.
Sparta meme is like 300. You've got like a bunch of dudes with six packs running around with spears, and they don't give a fuck about anything, and they'll murder you, right? Like they're not trying to hug you, they're not trying to be your friend. Like if you get in their way, they'll destroy you. If you threaten their families, their city, like try to make them pay tribute or bend the knee, they'll destroy you. That's the Sparta meme, right? And like Bitcoin has historically been like way more militant than something like Ethereum. Ethereum's much more inclusive, open, welcoming. It's like I think and maybe this comes from like the leadership, maybe this comes from us, but like when people ask me like what's Vitalik's biggest weakness, what I respond is that like he's way too optimistic about people's intentions, like well past the point that it makes sense. Like his and as a community we've sort of adopted that too. Like we're very unlikely to like point out that somebody is like antagonistic towards us because we don't like conflict. We don't want to we're not like fighters or something. Like Bitcoin is much different because they've been there for a long time, and their strategies just hate everything that's not Bitcoin, right? That's not a good strategy for Ethereum. That's not a good strategy for like fostering ideological open source development, right? But I guess I would just be worried that we're like erring too far on that spectrum, and like when people don't even realize, like when somebody like Ryan can talk about we're not competitive, we're not and like people buy it, that's like totally bizarre to me. And so you need a little bit of pushback, like a correction against stuff like that, to make people realize like, yeah, we are in a competition, but this isn't like total war either. It's more tit for tat, right? Like we're not going to their homes to try and kill them. It's like Leonidas in 300 doesn't like go all the way to Persia to try and like wreck them. He's just like sitting at home banging his queen, like, and then they show up, right? And so for Ethereum, it's like playing tit for tat would be advisable in some of these situations where it's like people are more likely to initiate a conflict with you if they think you're weak. So appropriately signaling your strength is a very important strategy for avoiding conflict in the long term.
So this is where somebody like you says, well, we could just fork substrate, for example. Is that something like, is that an example of something Vitalik would never propose, I guess, but somebody like you could propose and actually do, or fund?
Yeah, or just like calling Ryan out. Like Ryan was, I was on the phone with him. He's like fighting Ethereum to sell me dots, and then I just was like, bro, like what are you doing? Like how are you gonna come to this community and like pretend like you have the best interests at heart when you're just like, totally not doing that privately? Like it's bizarre to me, right? And so like I will assume bad intentions. I will call people out if I think it's worthwhile. I also back off once things have moved on. Like I'm not going to be stuck on it forever. But like having some people that do that, that adopt that part of the culture in order to like protect the rest of the community is something that I think is helpful. I got a lot of positive feedback from stepping up and voicing my opinions, and but that's also like not Vitalik's job. Like that's not what he's interested in. And I think the thing that's really important to preserve is like the spirit of collaboration, that like we want to play positive sum games. Like, we want to work with you. We want to make your stuff better. But if you want to play a zero sum game with us, fine, so be it. We'll win. Right? Like, we're not going to back down from that either.
What definite Amin Soleimani quote can you offer for the quote history of blockchain unquote book that will be written 100 years from now?
I mean, the like meme version of this would just be like, in booty we trust. Like, you know, what I'm trying to accomplish is to make booty the reserve currency of the earth. So yeah, in booty we trust.
Do you consider yourself a transhumanist? And I had to Google it just to be sure for people listening. Transhumanism is a philosophical movement that advocates for the transformation of the human condition by developing and making widely available sophisticated technologies to greatly enhance human intellect and physiology, according to Wikipedia. So do you consider yourself a transhumanist?
Yeah, for sure. Transhumanism is awesome. It's like, it's believing that, you know, the human form is not like the end state. Like, my current body is not the end state. Like, upgrades are great. We should all get upgrades. Like, I've had really funny conversations with transhumanists in Berkeley that like, they don't like girls with fake tits, which I think is really funny because, you know, they're all about upgrades. But they don't see the dissonance there. Yeah, I want to get like laser eye surgery. I want to live in a world where like, if you don't like your body, you can just get another one, right? Like, that
wait. Those are two very different things, right? Laser eye surgery and then swapping your body. That's a big leap.
Is it? It's just the further end of that spectrum, right? It's like, what's the next step?
Yeah,
right?
but it's a big spectrum, I would say.
Yeah, it's a big spectrum. But it's like, okay, you know, maybe I want to, like, dyeing my hair is like kind of transhuman, right? It's like,
wearing glasses.
Wearing glasses, right? And then it's like, okay, well, how do you keep this going, right? Like, what's next? Well, now you have like designer babies that, you know, use CRISPR in China to like eliminate AIDS. Like, you know, they can't get HIV because they have built-in protection. Well, that's great. Like, why not keep doing that? Why use vaccines? That's like such a crude tool in order to eliminate disease. Like, okay, well, once we're done eliminating disease, like, well, then what? Let's, you know, live longer, be healthier. Like, I want, you know, what if I want wings? Like, that would be great. Why shouldn't I have wings?
I'm not sure if you have children, but assuming you don't, like, what color of eyes will your firstborn have?
I have browns-ish, like hazel eyes. So I don't know. Depends. Like, I like green eyes. I like blue eyes, but like, I don't really know. I guess I don't have a strong opinion on like eye color for my kids.
All right.
I'd be more on like imagine you have a child, right? And you have the option to make them like 10% smarter, right? And you don't take it. And imagine the conversation that you have with your then 15-year-old child once they figure this out. And they're like, you could have done it. Like, why did you put me at this disadvantage? I hate you, right? And so it's like, everybody's going to do it because there's no good reason not to if you have the option. So like, I think it's inevitable.
But that, I mean, I agree with the outline of your position, but that specific case is not really true. I mean, if there's no reason to assume that let's use IQ as a rep. I mean, this is a very bad reference, but still, there's no reason to assume that somebody with a 10% higher IQ is any happier as a person. I mean, so there's a minimum, of course. Like, I think if your IQ is 70, you might argue that it's better to have 100 or 110. But I mean, you could perfectly make the case that being smarter or more gifted in any way is not necessarily, like, you know, just the other week I saw this video of a 7-year-old kid, and he turns out to be like this super sprinter. Like, I would never want to be that guy, like that kid, like 7-year-old. The whole world knows you and has expectations of you. And you could argue, look, we made you 20% faster than any other kid, and that kid might up being the most depressed kid ever. So I mean, I agree with the outline of the idea, but that specific case, I wouldn't really use as an example, because you just can't say that kid would benefit from the 10% increase in intelligence.
No, that's true. And like, it tends to be the other way around, right? It tends to be that like the smarter you are, the more depressed you are.
Yeah, exactly.
So like, if you don't know what's going on, like ignorance is bliss.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Like, this is great.
Like why didn't you make me 10% stupider? It's like, it's probably a better discussion to have.
Yeah. I mean, I guess my point is that like, it's also really hard. It's really hard to know in advance what effects these are going to have on the trajectory of your life. Like the probably the thing that you're trying to optimize for is like fitness, or some like category of like genetic fitness, where it's like, I want you to have whatever you need to like make it to the next round, and like become a well situated adult in society that can find a mate and reproduce and so forth, and like be healthy and raise your kids, right? That's like what everybody's been optimizing for as long as there's been people. So providing a tool to optimize further for that, I think everybody would take it.
Yeah. Well, I would say that nature gives us a situation where there's lots of variation, and the more variation, the more anti-fragile a system becomes. And so if everybody optimizes for the same, well, we don't have to go down this route. I know
what you're saying. Like, if everybody does the surgery and like or whatever procedure, and then like it turns out there's a bug in the procedure, then we're all fucked, right? So it's like, I hope there's lots of diversity in the different kinds of ways that we go about doing this,
because you can see how the things you can see how or argue the case that the things that we would want to optimize for will all be like very like intelligence, fitness, whatever, but you end up with less variation and thus less evolution. Anyway.
Yeah, biodiversity is a strong argument. I hope some people don't do this stuff in the name of preserving biodiversity. Just in
maybe there might be a lottery. Who knows? Anyway, who knows? Two more questions, Ameen. If you could snap your fingers and it'd be done, what's the one thing on Twitter you would change or make vanish?
There's this really annoying thing where like when you type a name into the search box, like the search results get populated a little later, and then like you push the button and like it drops down. It's been pissing me off for like 3 years. That's the first thing that comes to mind. I don't know. After that, like, oh man, I had the best Twitter feed because I follow like a bunch of porn stars, and so like my feed is like half crypto, half porn, and I've been doing this like impossible task of trying to make my Twitter feed a little less addicting, so I don't just like randomly get horny during the day. And I've gone through and like there maybe 1,000, but like I mute every single performer so that they don't show up on my main timeline, and then I add them to a list. So like if I want it, I can see it, but I have to like pick to a button. So like I don't know. That's what I'm doing to make Twitter better. Yeah.
First, where can people find you? And second, do you have any parting advice or words of wisdom for people listening to this?
Holy shit, if you made it through this whole 2 hours, like, good job. Where can you find me? I'm ameensol on Twitter and Reddit, and you can hang out with Spankchain, join our Discord, tip our performers generously, tell them about Ethereum. That's where you can find me. Parting advice, I don't know, biddle, I guess, like, stay focused. Ethereum's going to change the world. It's a matter of time. There's still a lot of work to do. So if you're an investor type, then like try to help out devs where possible. Try to make your voice heard. If you're a developer, trying to take my own advice here. It's like try not to get too carried away on Twitter battles and like stuff like that. So,
all right, then. I mean, I guess we actually finished all the questions. Like when we started and we needed like 45 minutes and we hadn't even finished with the Spankchain questions, I was like, oh, but we went through all of them. So thank you very much for taking the time. and enjoy Washington, D.C., I would say. And thank you for everybody who's listening or reading this for submitting the questions and being part of this. It's great to get the feedback we had so far. So,
yeah. Thanks for organizing and getting the questions and for taking your time to sit down and talk to me. I really appreciate it.
All right. See you, Ameen. Bye.
See you.